Hey, I'm checking in with tracks 12 and 13 of The Innocents by Michael Crummy, which, yes, I kind of mentioned it at the beginning, um, of with Mr. Truss and Mrs. Brace suddenly pulling up in their schooner, a schooner that she is a servant to Mr. Truss, who is a retired um, English dude. Well, not retired as much as doesn't have enough money to do anything back in London, so is now here in Newfoundland. I start to get a little bit idea of like been guessing of like we're in the 1800s somewhere, and indeed there's a mention of Queen Anne's War, which so it's like because of the fleur-de-lis, it's like, oh, it could have been a soldier rager, you know, somebody who's along these shores, raider along these shores. But that was probably long before your father's time, and that was like 1703 to like 1713. And then there is a mention later, because they go in hunt of the native burial ground. Well, Everett actually doesn't actually lead them to the native burial ground. And that is, they talk about how they're almost extinct, the native peoples, which I think if it's the Bothunk tribe, um, were like 18 in the 1800s, like 1830s or 1850s was the last. So it's probably like the 1800s, somewhere in the 1800s, that this is all taking place. But yes, so Mr. Truss and Mrs. Brace are able to kind of nurse Ada back to health, even with the bloodletting. She gets back to health. Um, Truss teaches Everett how to hunt, and we have what I now say is my most horrific scene in this book, which is they're out hunting and they come across the mother bear and baby bear, who's now like a yearling, which Ada had gotten really frightened of before. Um, she had come upon them, come upon the baby bear, which had scrambled away back to the mother, and the mother had like oof, and kind of glared at her and moved away, and like she remembered how the bear had kind of circled in on them another time, and she just tore off, and that's when she ended up in the stream feeling very alive after that near death. But they come upon the bear, and Mr. Truss gives Everett the shot, and he shoots the mother bear immediately and kills her immediately. And the yearling kind of is pawing at the mother, and then realizes what's happened and sees them and charges at them. And Everett's like, oh, Truss is like, okay, get your second shot in. But he breaks the ramrod, and so Mr. Truss uses Everett's thing, which has just got birdshot in it, and with after two shots blinds this yearling, which then stumbles off into the woods, wailing in pain. And they don't finish it off. They don't find it to finish it off. They don't really try to finish it off. It's just really fucking brutal world. They butcher the mother bear, and that meat. Mr. Truss is taking a good hunk of it, but there's also that's gonna get them through winter. So it's necessary. I think it's something about the whole thing of this is a whole story about a brother, two siblings who's surviving without their parents, and now here's another child, a bear child, that is just going to just dies in the woods. And indeed later, Ada comes across the skull of this, which is probably starved to death slowly, and painfully starved to death. This bear, which just I found that really tough to listen to. But it's also I have to say I admire Michael Crummy. It's like this is living, surviving in the woods and in the wilderness, and you do what you do. Um, you know, just really fucking brutal. Um, they are on Truss and Brace are only there for a while. Um, um, Everett really notices Mrs. Brace, who's got fairly large breasts and just like somewhere between her mother's age and their mother's age, and the uh, the the what's her Molly, who was the midwife age, and it's like really does notice her. And indeed, after he's gone, it's like he's got something else he can kind of fantasize about when he's whacking off or going off into the woods and whacking off. And they have, it's these two have this relationship where it's like they only have each other, and they can't actually talk to each other for a good hunk in here. They're like poisoned to each other. They do just a really good job. Crummy does a really good job of just like, how tangled and vexed and intense and close these two are to each other. And at the end of this section, they've actually kind of gotten into a rhythm of hunting now because they've got the gun, because they're setting traps. They're actually now hunting together, and essentially they're spending time together. And it's not that there's not that division, and they seem to have come to kind of an equilibrium. They're not grinding on each other, I don't believe, but they're just like I think they're saying like they're sleeping innocent, in the same bed again, except for when she has her period and she moves off into the other bed. And yeah, they've got a bit of a equilibrium. However, I've just the next chapter, 14 has happened, and the dude has arrived at the door. It's like a rapping sound at the door, and it takes him a while to realize, oh, it's someone actually knocking at the door, and it's this guy from the Medusa, name of the ship, which I thought was the name of Mr. Truss's ship, but I'm not quite sure. But yeah. When they do see the beetle, who's like when they give him the pelts and all that, like a beaver pelt and all these other pelts, it's like they gives them good amount of supplies and a promise for iron traps. And it's like, oh, and they've got shot. It's like they're actually doing incredibly, as good as they can do for materially. And now this guy's arrived, so I guess we'll see what complications that ensues, because it is a fucking brutal world. And so far the people they've met, luckily they didn't meet the guy who was eating people on that ship, but the people they've met have actually been fairly benign, haven't been somebody who would take advantage or might say, you've got stuff, I'm going to take it, and I'll do whatever I need to do to take it because I'm surviving in this world, and I don't care if you survive. It's like the innocence, because they have been they are pretty innocent of the world, even though they're well acquainted with the really fucking hard, brutal facts of nature. So yeah, it's really the book definitely pulls me along. That's what I have to say about The Innocents this time along. All right, more videos later.